Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Woo-hoo.
Welcome to Conversations with SOTU. I'm Adrienne Metcalf.
And I'm Josh Schwartzbeck.
Josh is a professional channel, a medium, and he channels the consciousness we call SOTU. It's a very easy process for him. He's been doing this for over 20 years, and SOTU has some very unique perspectives on what's going on for all of us now as the world is going through changes. Question everything you hear from us today. Decide for yourself if it rings true for you or not. Josh, are you ready to channel?
I'm ready to channel.
Here we go.
All right. Well. We are SOTU. And we invite you to join us on another journey through the infinite realms of your imagination. This is episode
Number 8.
number 8 of what we believe will be 9 episodes in this particular part of the series. And we wish to speak to you today in a little bit of a dynamic of a retrospective of what we have been presenting to you. And this dynamic, we would like to have you understand, is one that is intended to give you a consideration of an aspect of reality that is not often considered. And that is the dynamic of the growth, of the movement, of the what some people call ascension of the entire species, of earthly humanity. Earthly humanity as a species has reached a crossroads of growth. A crossroads that your reality has been asking you for many thousands of years, has been pushing you for many thousands of years in a certain direction, a direction that leads to experience, an experience that leads to growth, and growth that perhaps might even just lead to wisdom.
Yes.
And so as the dynamic of the movement of a species and the, what shall we say, the metaphysical, the universal, the divine, the godlike, the unconscious dynamic that comes from within in order to feel that dynamic of wishing to be more, of wishing to grow, of wishing to understand more, of wishing to gain a dynamic of mastery in your reality. Now, we're not talking about a dynamic of power over, but we're talking about a dynamic of what we're talking about is true empowerment, that dynamic of connection with the sacred I am, the sacred I am, the sacred I am. For it is that dynamic of the connection with all that is. It is that dynamic of the connection with your mother, the earth, that allows you, that creates the dynamic of projection, that creates this dynamic of reality. In the movement of, and as we have often said, if you use the metaphor of personal growth, of the personal growth of your body, you can understand the growth of the entire species, and your body of humanity is now reaching the point where you're about to move into your adulthood. We will be pointing out over this show and the next one especially how your responses to things have been adolescent up to this point. But that you are being asked as individuals and you are being asked as a species to make a wiser, or let us say to make wiser, more adult choices. To become peacemakers, to become problem solvers, to deal with the dynamics of the real issues without allowing yourself to be distracted, without allowing yourselves to be confused. For everything, dear ones, is understandable if you understand the dynamic of the personal dynamic of movement, of your own personal dynamic of growth. And so we began to speak to you a little bit last week. We were running short of time on the dynamics of Are You Sure? And how those dynamics of Are You Sure are really just a presentation of your unconscious. It is a presentation of the way your soul speaks to you. On an emotional level, and we're talking strictly on the emotional level right now, on an emotional level, you are, what shall we say, often repeating certain dynamics of behavior that leads to dynamics that are ultimately negative, or let us say similar in their outcome. And those dynamics, you know, some of you find it very difficult to break out of those patterns of belief because, as we have often said, belief creates behavior that reinforces belief that creates behavior. And that dynamic will continue until you are the one that makes the choice to break these patterns within self. Now, these patterns are generally patterns that you have chosen to deal with in an individual lifetime. And so it is up to your soul to keep giving you those opportunities to change things. And often, sometimes, what will happen, let's just take, we use the easy example of coming into a lifetime to wish to learn about love. And so you will have a negative experience around love early on in your life, which will imprint you with a belief that it's not safe to love. Now, obviously, your life's journey is one at that point that's going to take you to a place where you're constantly going to revisit that dynamic of is it safe to love, of is it safe to love, is it safe to love, and you're going to continue along that pattern until you get uncomfortable enough to break out of it. And so that's what generally happens. There is an internal emotional dynamic that keeps building on itself until finally, when so many of you are in your middle to late years, you actually wind up choosing a partner. You wind up actually choosing to be with someone that actually nurtures and serves you rather than takes away from your dynamic, where a relationship that can be described as synergistic, where 1 + 1 equals more than 2.
Yes.
As opposed to 1 + 1 equals 2.
Or 1.
Or 1. Because that's often what happens in your world, is the dynamics of 1 + 1 equals 1.
Yes.
In other words, you will have each person on their own will be dysfunctional in their own way.
But you put them
together. Put them together.
Right.
And you have a whole person. Now, so many of, well, you know, because you've got a lot of beliefs around love, dear one. You know, one-way love is safe, you know, when we can get into a whole show just around the dynamics of love, but we want to get back to the dynamic of Are You Sure? So let us say that you have finally met someone that really resonates with you, but it doesn't fit the pattern of the old person, the old man or the old woman or the old person of the same sex of you, that it doesn't follow the pattern of the type of person that you had chosen in the past, the type of person that you had chosen from, let us say, a subconscious or an unconscious way. Not, you know, the old patterning of the dynamics of belief that operates around people as well. Belief creates behavior, so you will draw to you exactly the person that will reinforce the negativity rather than the person that will give you the opportunity to really love. And so you'll finally meet that one person who will give you that opportunity to really love, and you'll have to realize you're going to have to open up that part of yourself, and you're going to have to be vulnerable Because that's the dynamic, isn't it, dear ones? In order to open to love, your belief is that you must be vulnerable. Now, that's a belief that can be changed, and again, that's another show.
We're getting into love a lot today.
Because, in fact, we talk about the dynamic of love, but is that not just energy?
Sure.
Is that not just the dynamic of the raw material that you utilize in order to create your reality?
Okay.
One of them, well, it's an emotion. You create
Yes.
your reality through your thoughts, your words, and your feelings. So in the dynamics of love. But love is an easy target for us because so many of you don't have it, and so many of you really long for it. And so, but you keep finding yourselves in relationships that don't serve you, in relationships that fit old patterns, in relationships that bring up that old emotion. And this is the key, that brings up that old emotion that it's not safe to love. And usually that will happen through a dynamic of, what shall we say, naivete on your part. Because you leave yourself, well, you think, well, maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe this time, this type of person, this person that I'm attracted to, oh yeah, he's still an alcoholic, or she's still a, oh yeah, they're still codependent. But maybe this time it'll be different. And you are oh so surprised when you get the same thing, the same boot in the butt that you have always gotten in that dynamic. And again, there's that whole dynamic of reinforcement. Belief creates behavior that reinforces belief that creates behavior. Until you get so uncomfortable as you're ready to expand the dynamic of what you wish, what you believe that you wish. Now, consider a dynamic of a lifetime having had negative relationships in that sort of way, and you finally meet the person, you finally meet that one person where the possibility of a real dynamic of relationship holds. Well, dear ones, you have to understand your subconscious, your soul, which is that piece of you that keeps giving you those opportunities for more love in your life, they don't know whether you're really serious or not this time. So it's kind of like the great cosmic, are you sure? Adrian, if you use the analogy of a computer.
Yes. Yes, because most people are familiar with that, certainly.
And you put you have used the program for many, many years, let us say. But the program has become obsolete. It doesn't serve you any longer. It is nothing, it's crashing your computer, it is causing nothing but hassle, nothing but trouble. And you say, oh, well, I'm going to get a new computer. Mm-hmm. All right?
New program.
A new program. Well, you have to tell the new computer, I'm getting a new one. Okay. Don't you have to communicate with computers in that way? No, you don't. We're joking, of course.
Okay.
But in that whole dynamic, if you have let us say, or you're absolutely right in the dynamic of the program. If you're going to upgrade your program and you want to delete the old program, you highlight the program, you hit the delete program you hit the delete button, and what's the first thing the program asks you?
Are you sure?
Are you sure? Are you sure that you really wish to change this? And now, because the subconscious only understands emotion, metaphor, and symbol, emotion, metaphor, and symbol.
In order to reprogram the computer, in order to get rid of this programming that says it's not safe to love, we have to find a way to talk to the computer in its own language.
Well, and that is in the dynamic of emotion, metaphor, and symbol. Exactly. So, when the only way that the computer, the only way your mind, the only way your reality has to ask you, if you are you really sure that you wish to change the dynamic, is by offering you the same old. They're going to offer you a relationship that's going to lead you back to that same dynamic of negativity. That same dynamic of having the rug pulled out from under you. that same dynamic of abandonment, of betrayal, of whatever the dynamic ultimately is that leads to this reinforcement of negativity. And if you take the old way, because so many of you believe that some love is better than no love at all.
Right.
All right,
or maybe this time it will work out.
Or maybe this time it will work out. You're giving ambiguous messages, and you're going to send that dynamic around one more time, and the next time it comes back, it's going to speak even a little more loudly. Because you cannot avoid your life lessons, dear one. You come into a life with a certain, and we don't even like to use the word lesson, but let us say you cannot avoid the playground that you choose to come in on. And because the playground that you come in on is a dynamic of choice that has to do with the dynamic of the growth that you wish to achieve in this particular lifetime. And your soul is going to keep giving you those opportunities because that's the deal. When you come into the physical, you come in with all of the ability of God got us all that is, just nobody tells you.
So if we know that that's our life goal, that we wish to, this lifetime I'm going to work and change this belief that's not safe to love. We'll have that experience.
Well, you don't even really wish to change. So many of you that are locked into the dynamic of living your lives without any, what shall we say, divine understanding of the growth that is being urged. You think that you don't have a purpose here. You think that the dynamic of incarnation is simply for the dynamics of personal growth, is simply for... No, it is more than that. As you grow, as you understand more, as you become more, so does the divine become more, so does that dynamic of increased consciousness expand outwardly in the world. Now, please understand something. We are speaking in a very simplified manner, and in truth, the dynamic is constantly in flux. There is a dynamic of a constant wave action, a constant, shall we say, inspiration and exhalation.
So at that point of changing, we've found a way to talk to our subconscious to say, we want to get rid of this program that says it's not safe to love, and then we're going to be offered an opportunity to do it the old way. It's at that point, if we can say
It's
no
at that point, right.
and do it differently,
then what happens is that a whole new series of opportunities begin to present themselves to you. And the difficulty in the dynamic is choosing often 5 or 6 positive opportunities. Well,
yes, we've seen that happen. We have seen that happen.
Any number of times.
Yes.
So that is the dynamic of the are you sure that plays out on the personal level. Well, this also plays out on the level of the entire species. If you look at the dynamics of growth and the dynamics, and we know that many of you are gray heads, like silver heads like this one and this one, and so you perhaps can understand with a perspective of history of what has occurred in this country and in your world as a whole, that this dynamic is one that has been moving for many, 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 many years. And we can, as we said, we could take it back to World War II, but as we bring it more up to date within these dynamics, because last week we remembered that we asked you if you could figure out what the Are You Sure was. And so please, we would have you understand that there has been these dynamics of opportunities and these dynamics of growth that have been going on the whole time. And as we move up to the dynamic of the change of the millennium, because that's what we spoke about last week, was that dynamic of January 31st or January 1st, 2000, December 31st, 1999, that that evening something happened on your planet that had never happened before. And we explained last week about that wave of unconditional love that basically surrounded the planet in relief and in hope of the dynamics of a new world. And in that dynamic, and the Are You Sure, on a special level, came on the level of the entire species, came after that. Okay, because that's the way it kind of works. Whole new dynamic of the experience of love and connection and brotherhood and sisterhood. And then all of a sudden, the Are You Sure? But it began before that. It began with the dynamics of the 70s and the 80s and Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, and even before that Nixon and Ronald Reagan, and from our perspective, in the dynamics of your movement, your growth into individuation, in approximately 1980 or so with the election of Reagan, you separated from compassion. And as you began to move forward, we would suggest to you that the dynamics of the 90s, of 92 to 2000 in particular, did a great deal to set the stage for the difficulties of today. Not that it was all their fault or anything like that, but you must understand that the one side had lost repeatedly in many elections, and in order to beat the Republicans, in a way, became Republican light. And so you began to have two sides of the same coin, and the beginnings of the, what so many of you are calling the dark state right now.
Yes.
And but again, this began years and years and years ago. Those of you that remember Kennedy and before Johnson and that whole time, you understand there was a different flavor in the world, that those of you in the United States truly felt that you were spreading the dynamics of, that you were the good guys. You know, you believed you were the good guys. And that dynamic began to be used against you. And so while you continued to believe that you were the good guys, so many bad things were being perpetrated in your name. And so this whole dynamic has been moving ever since, ever through the early part and the mid part of the 80s into the 90s, around that, and going up to the culmination around the dynamic of the millennium, with the change of the millennium. And if you looked at the reflection of what you were getting from your news media in those days, it was all positive. They say that people were having, employers were having trouble finding people to work at McDonald's because there were not enough jobs, because there were too many good jobs. And this was the dynamic, this was the energetic hope, this was the naivete.
Yes. That
you went into the year 2000 with. And so that dynamic was huge around that.
So when this wave of unconditional love swept the planet, it was such a giant step for humanity.
Well, it was a huge step forward, but it also, please understand, it was only through the dynamics of technology that it was possible. Again, time zone after time zone, without the dynamic of the fear of Y2K, with Y2K not manifesting itself, there was that dynamic of relief added to that dynamic of hope, which created a groundswell, time zone by time zone, across the planet, energetically, emotionally, of unconditional love. It was the first time in human history that had ever occurred. And, dear ones, in a relatively short period of time, you got your first Are You Sure? Now there have been a number of them, and we're going to get into more of those next week.
Gonna leave us on another cliff.
We are. But look at the dynamic. So we asked the question, dear ones, What was the are you sure? No, you don't get the answer. Because you already know the answer.
I know the answer, yes.
What was the are you sure? And so many of you passed it off with a ho-hum when it was oh so important. You were presenting yourselves a certain picture of your image and who you were. You were America. You were freedom. You were liberty. You were all of these things of this dynamic. And what was and then you have this dynamic of love and connection. Whoa, are you sure? And what was that? What was that one thing that happened? And that one thing that happened was the selection of George W. Bush in the year 2000 by the Supreme Court. And so that dynamic of that are you sure set the stage for the are you sures of the modern age. Because, dear ones, we would suggest to you, you have not answered the are you sure very well. We love you all so very, very much. We've gone right up to the end today. We'll be back next week and we'll speak to you, and we hope to bring it up to present day. We love you all so very, very much. We are SOTU. This is Conversations with SOTU for the 24th day of April, 2017. Until next time we close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy.
Thank you for joining us again for Conversations with SOTU, when we find ourselves again on the edge of another cliff. But come back next week. Until then, if you'd like to find out more, go to our website, conversationswithsotu.org. There's a contact page if you have questions. There's also information about SOTU's weekly SOTUesday broadcasts, very short, speaking about the energy of the moment, and also our once a month Live with SOTU Unfiltered. Till the next time, thanks. We'll see you then.
You may say